He unlocked the sealed gate without knowing and awakened an ancient dragon on a distant planet far from Earth. A young man named Alex had always been curious. He was a wanderer, someone who loved to explore places no one dared to go. Today, he found himself standing in front of an old, weathered temple. The air was thick with the smell of ancient dust and the walls were covered in strange symbols. Alex grinned to himself. Probably just another abandoned ruin, he muttered under his breath. But something about this place felt different. The temple's entrance, though crumbled with time, still seemed to hold a strange kind of power. It was as if the stones themselves were waiting for someone to notice them. With his backpack slung over one shoulder and a flashlight in his hand, Alex pushed through the vines that covered the entrance. His boots crunched on the dry earth as he stepped inside. The space was dark, but his flashlight flickered to life, casting long shadows on the stone walls. The air was cooler inside, and it smelled faintly of something metallic. The walls were lined with ancient carvings, but they seemed to shift in the beam of light as though they were alive. Alex moved deeper into the temple, his flashlight illuminating more intricate designs. But what caught his attention the most was a large, sealed gate at the far end of the room. It was massive, towering over him like a relic from a forgotten age. The gate was made of a strange, smooth metal, unlike anything Alex had seen before. At its center was a large symbol, an eye glowing faintly in the darkness. Well, isn't that interesting? Alex chuckled. He was no archaeologist, but even he could tell that this was not an ordinary gate. It was more like a door from a dream, or a nightmare. His fingers traced the cool surface of the gate running over the strange symbol. As he did, a low hum filled the room. It was a soft sound at first, barely audible, but it grew louder with each passing second. Alex felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. But he wasn't afraid, no, he was intrigued. This was exactly what he had been hoping for when he set out on this adventure. Probably just some old mechanism, Alex muttered to himself. With a grin, he made a snap decision. Let's see what happens. Without giving it much thought, he pressed his palm against the glowing symbol at the center of the gate. The hum increased in volume, and for a moment, Alex thought the ground beneath him was shaking. He stepped back, eyes wide, expecting some sort of mechanical movement or a hidden trap to trigger, but nothing happened. The gate remained still. Guess it's just a decoration, he said, laughing at himself. But as he turned to leave, something strange occurred. The hum turned into a sharp screeching noise. It echoed off the walls of the temple, reverberating through Alex's bones. He froze, his heart skipping a beat. Suddenly, the glowing symbol on the gate flickered, and then the metal surface began to shift. The large gate creaked, groaning as if it had been asleep for millennia. Slowly, it began to open, revealing a dark passageway behind it. Alex's mouth went dry. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. The gate had opened. On its own. Okay, that's not normal, he whispered to himself, staring at the dark passageway that now yawned open before him. The air around the gate was charged with energy, almost like static electricity. He could feel it in the air, prickling against his skin. The darkness beyond seemed endless, stretching into nothingness. A part of him wanted to turn around and leave, to forget this place ever existed. But another part, the curious part, the adventurous part, urged him to step forward. Alex had always been fascinated by the unknown. That was why he was here in the first place. He couldn't let this strange discovery go unexplored. Besides, he reasoned, there was no telling when he'd ever come across something like this again. With a deep breath, he stepped closer to the open gate, his footsteps echoing in the silence. As he approached, the temperature dropped, and the air grew thick with a sense of heaviness. The shadows beyond the gate seemed to twist and swirl, as though something or someone was waiting there, just beyond his sight. "All right," Alex whispered, more to himself than anyone else. "Here we go." He stepped across the threshold into the passage. The moment his foot crossed the line, the air seemed to crackle, and the gate slammed shut behind him with a deafening crash. Alex spun around, his heart pounding in his chest. The gate was sealed once more, but now something was different. He could hear faint whispers, soft, almost like a distant conversation. The floor beneath him seemed to pulse with life, and the walls of the passage began to shift. The strange symbols on the walls glowed, casting eerie light on his face. Suddenly, a voice, deep and resonant, echoed through the chamber. "You should not have come." Alex's breath caught in his throat. The voice wasn't human. and it wasn't just a whisper. It was clear, loud and powerful, filling every corner of the chamber. His heart raced as he stood frozen in place. His joke had gone too far, and now it seemed the ancient temple had something to say about it. Alex's heart raced in his chest as the voice echoed through the dark chamber. He spun around, eyes darting from shadow to shadow, trying to find the source. But there was nothing, no one. The whispers, however, continued, growing louder with each passing moment, surrounding him like a thick fog. They weren't words in any language he recognized, yet somehow, he understood the meaning behind them. You should not have come. The words replayed in his mind, reverberating off the walls of the passageway. The voice was deep, ancient, and it carried an unmistakable weight of authority. But it wasn't just the voice that made Alex's blood run cold. It was the way the air itself seemed to vibrate with energy. A strange electric hum filled the room, and the walls seemed to pulse like the heart of some ancient sleeping creature was slowly coming to life. "Who's there?" Alex called out, his voice shaking despite his best efforts to sound confident. He took a cautious step forward, his flashlight trembling in his grip. The light flickered, casting erratic shadows on the walls, as if the darkness itself was trying to push him back. The whispers grew louder, then suddenly stopped. A terrifying silence hung in the air, so thick that Alex felt as if he could reach out and touch it. His breathing became shallow, his senses heightened, waiting for something, anything, to happen. Then it did. A low rumble, like distant thunder, echoed through the temple. The ground beneath Alex's feet began to shake, just slightly at first, then harder. Dust and debris fell from the ceiling, and the walls creaked as if they were stretching, waking up from centuries of slumber. The temperature dropped even further, and Alex's breath came out in visible clouds. He shivered, but the cold wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the overwhelming feeling of being watched, observed by something far beyond his comprehension. Suddenly, the floor beneath him split open with a loud crack. Alex stumbled back, his flashlight slipping from his grip and crashing to the ground. His heart pounded in his chest as he scrambled to retrieve the light, shining it into the newly opened fissure. There, in the depths of the crack, a pair of glowing eyes emerged. Not human, not alien, but something in between. They were ancient, and their light was cold, like the stars themselves. They seemed to stare directly into Alex's soul, as though they could see every thought, every fear hidden deep within him. A shiver ran down his spine, and his knees buckled under the weight of the gaze. "Turn back," the voice said again, clearer now, but it wasn't the same voice as before. It was as if 1,000 voices were speaking at once, all in perfect unison. The voice was not merely a warning, it was a command. Alex stood frozen, unsure whether to run or stay. His curiosity, that unshakable urge to uncover the secrets hidden in the ruins, waged war against his instinct to flee. The whispers, the rumbling, the glowing eyes, they all felt wrong, like a trap was being set just for him, before he could make up his mind. The air shifted, and a massive gust of wind slammed into him from all sides. He staggered backward, his feet slipping on the slick stone floor. The walls seemed to twist, the carvings on them shifting and changing like the writhing patterns of a living thing. They moved with a kind of deliberate slowness, their forms bending and reshaping into shapes that almost made sense, until they didn't. The strange symbols, once static, now pulsed with an otherworldly energy. The eyes, glowing faintly in the dark, followed Alex's every movement. The passageway ahead was no longer an empty tunnel. It had become something else, something alive. The wall seemed to close in on him, growing darker, more oppressive. The exit, the way back, seemed to have disappeared, leaving him trapped in this alien living maze. A figure emerged from the shadows, so tall that it seemed to blot out the light. At first, Alex thought it was a trick of the light, a mere shadow. But then the figure stepped forward, revealing its true form. It was enormous, towering over him like a guardian, its body made of the same strange metal as the gate. Its eyes, now fully open, burned with an eerie, otherworldly glow. Alex could feel the power radiating from it like an electric current, and he instinctively took a step back, his heart pounding. It wasn't just the size of the figure that made Alex's knees weak, it was the sheer presence of it. This was no ordinary sentinel. This was something far older, far more dangerous, and it was awake. The sentinel's voice rang out, deep and resonant like thunder rolling across the sky. "You have disturbed the peace of this temple. The price for your trespass will be paid in full." Alex's eyes widened in terror, He had made a mistake, a huge one. But it was too late now. The gate, the voices, the whispers, they had all been signs that he had unleashed something far beyond his understanding. The sentinel took a step forward, its metal feet scraping against the stone floor, and Alex felt the weight of its gaze fall upon him. "You cannot leave," the sentinel declared, its voice filled with both sorrow and fury. "You have opened the gate and now you must face the consequences." The walls of the temple seemed to close in tighter, and Alex's breath became shallow. Panic set in. He had no idea what this thing was or what it wanted. But one thing was clear. He had awakened an ancient force, and there was no going back now. The ground beneath him rumbled again, and this time it wasn't a warning. The rumble grew louder, and the temperature dropped even further. Alex felt a chill so cold it pierced to his very bones. His mind raced. What had he gotten himself into? The sentinel stepped closer, its massive form blocking the way out. Alex's thoughts spun wildly. He had to think fast, he had to find a way to escape, but nothing made sense anymore. The gate, the whispers, the glowing eyes, it was all connected, but how? And what was this creature that had awakened to stop him? The shadows in the room seemed to stretch, and the glowing eyes of the sentinel flickered as it raised its hand, its fingers crackling with energy. "You have awakened the Ancient One," the sentinel said, its voice almost mournful now. "Now you must prove yourself worthy or perish." Alex's heart raced as the shadows moved closer, and the floor began to tremble beneath his feet. Whatever was about to happen, it was no longer in his control. He had touched the sealed gate as a joke, and now, the ancient forces of this long-forgotten temple were awake, and they were not forgiving. The massive sentinel loomed over Alex, its glowing eyes never leaving him, casting an eerie light that seemed to distort the shadows around him. The temperature continued to drop, and the very air felt charged with anticipation. Alex's heart pounded in his chest as he tried to steady his breath, but the fear crawling up his spine was inescapable. "You have awakened me," the sentinel spoke again, its voice like an ancient thunderous roar that seemed to shake the very walls of the temple. "For centuries I have slumbered, guarding what should remain hidden. But now you, a mere human, have broken the seal. You shall pay the price for your trespass." Alex stepped back, his mind racing. "What do you want from me?" His voice trembled, but he stood his ground, unwilling to show weakness. He had come this far, and he wasn't going to let fear control him now. The sentinel's eyes glowed brighter, and Alex felt a wave of energy pulse through the ground beneath his feet. The wall seemed to close in, the passage growing narrower and the air heavier. He could feel the presence of something ancient, something incomprehensible, watching him from every direction. "You must prove yourself," the sentinel declared, its voice now both cold and solemn. "Your arrogance, your foolishness in touching the gate, has brought forth the challenge. But fear not, for I will not destroy you yet. If you are worthy, I shall grant you knowledge beyond your wildest dreams. If not, your soul will remain here lost and forgotten for eternity." Alex's stomach twisted in knots. What kind of test was this? He had no idea what he was up against, but he had no choice now. The gate had been opened, and the ancient force had already awoken. There was no turning back. His only option was to face whatever the sentinel demanded of him. "Prove myself how?" Alex asked, trying to mask the unease in his voice, though it was evident in his eyes. The presence in the room felt suffocating, as though the temple itself was closing in around him, ready to consume him whole. The sentinel's head tilted slightly, its gaze fixed on him. "You must pass 3 trials, human. The first a test of mind, the second a test of heart, the third a test of soul. Only if you succeed in all will you earn the right to understand what lies beyond the gate. Fail and you will be lost here forever." Alex swallowed hard. 3 trials. The words alone sent a shiver down his spine. He had no idea what kind of challenges awaited him, but he knew one thing for certain. He had to face them. He couldn't back down now. "I'm ready," Alex said, trying to sound braver than he felt. He clenched his fists, his resolve hardening. This was what he came for, wasn't it? To discover the unknown, to uncover ancient secrets. But now it felt more like a death sentence. The sentinel raised one enormous arm, and with a slow, deliberate motion, it pointed to the far side of the temple, where the walls seemed to shift and distort in the darkness. The shadows twisted and writhed, creating a path that led deeper into the bowels of the temple. "Your first trial begins there," the sentinel's voice boomed. "Follow the path and you will understand what is required of you. But be warned, The trials will test everything you are. Do not think it will be easy." Alex took a deep breath, his mind racing with questions. What kind of trial awaited him? What would it do to him? Could he even survive it? Without another word, Alex stepped toward the shifting shadows, the air around him growing colder with each step. As he entered the darkened passage, the temperature seemed to drop further and the walls of the temple seemed to hum with an unnatural energy. He moved slowly, his flashlight flickering erratically as the darkness enveloped him. The further he walked, the heavier the air became, thick with an oppressive force that pressed against him like an invisible weight. His footsteps echoed loudly in the silence, and each sound seemed to reverberate back at him from every direction. The shadows on the walls twisted in unnatural patterns as if they were alive, watching him, waiting. Then suddenly, the path before him opened up into a vast chamber. At the center of the room stood a large stone pedestal, and atop it was a strange glowing orb. The orb pulsed with a steady rhythm, casting an eerie light across the chamber. Its glow seemed to draw him in, as if it were calling to him, beckoning him closer. Alex hesitated, his gut telling him that something wasn't right. But curiosity pushed him forward and he stepped closer to the pedestal. The moment he touched the orb, a searing pain shot through his chest, and the world around him shifted violently. The chamber dissolved into nothingness, and Alex found himself standing in the middle of a vast, barren desert. The sky was a swirling mass of black and red, as if the very atmosphere itself was being torn apart. The wind howled around him, carrying with it a sense of deep sorrow and despair. The ground beneath his feet was cracked and dry, and in the distance he could see a figure, tall, shrouded in shadow, standing motionless. "Welcome to the first trial," a voice whispered from nowhere. "This is your mind's trial. It will show you your deepest fears. You must face them and survive. Only then will you prove your worth." Alex's heart hammered in his chest. This wasn't just some test. It was a fight for his sanity. He had no idea what kind of nightmare he was about to face, but the sense of dread that washed over him was enough to make him question if he was truly ready for this. The figure in the distance began to move. Slowly it turned toward him, revealing a face twisted in agony. It was a reflection of Alex's own face, a version of himself, broken, defeated, lost in despair. The figure spoke, its voice echoing across the barren landscape. "You failed. You always fail." Alex's breath caught in his throat. This was his greatest fear, failure. Not being enough. Not living up to his potential. He had always feared being insignificant, just another person lost in the vastness of the universe. But this was a trial. And he had to survive it. He clenched his fists, the weight of his fear pressing down on him. But he wasn't going to let it control him. He had to prove himself. Not just to the Sentinel, but to himself. The air around Alex thickened, the heat of the desert pressing in from all sides. He stood on the cracked, dry earth, his breath shallow and labored, his hands trembling slightly. The figure of himself, the twisted, broken version of who he feared he might become, was still standing in front of him, the anguish on its face like a mirror reflecting his own deepest insecurities. "You failed," the figure repeated, its voice cold and bitter like an accusation that rang in his ears. "You always fail. You'll never amount to anything, just like everyone else. A forgotten soul in the vastness of this universe." Alex's chest tightened, the weight of those words sinking deep into his soul, the guilt, the self-doubt, the crushing feeling of inadequacy. Everything he had buried deep inside for years seemed to come rushing to the surface. It felt as if his very existence was being questioned, as if he had already lost the battle before it even began. But Alex refused to give in. Not this time. He clenched his fists, the intensity of his emotions pushing him forward, and he took a step toward the figure. "You're wrong," he said, his voice trembling at first, but it grew stronger with each word. "I'm not like you. I'm not broken. I can prove it." The figure let out a hollow laugh, its hollow eyes staring at him with cold amusement. "Prove it? How? You're nothing but a fleeting moment. A tiny speck in the grand scheme of things. You'll never overcome the truth. You're weak. You will fail, just like you always have." Alex's heart pounded in his chest. The words stung, but something inside him stirred. A flicker of defiance. The voice inside his head whispered, "You are not weak. You are stronger than this. In a rush, memories flooded his mind, his childhood, his mistakes, his failures. The moments when he had felt small, insignificant, just a speck in the vastness of the world. The times he had been told he wasn't good enough, that he would never amount to anything. Those memories, those fears, they had shaped him. They had nearly broken him. But here, now, he was being given a choice. He could let this version of himself, the broken, defeated version, take control, or he could rise above it. The choice was his. The wind howled around him, and the desert sky seemed to twist and darken, as if the world itself was watching, waiting for him to make his decision. With a deep breath, Alex took another step toward the twisted figure. "I'm not running away from this anymore," he said, his voice steady and strong. "I will face my fears. I will face the truth of who I am." The figure's eyes narrowed and a smile twisted its lips. "Very well," it said, its voice dripping with mockery. "Then prove it. Show me what you're made of." Without warning, the desert landscape shifted again. The cracked earth began to crumble beneath Alex's feet, and the sky above him swirled into a storm of dark clouds. Lightning crackled in the distance, and the wind screamed around him as the ground started to break apart. Alex felt the earth shifting beneath him, the sand swirling into a massive vortex, pulling him downward. Panic surged within him, and his instincts screamed for him to run, but he couldn't. Not this time. He looked down at his feet, realizing that the earth was splitting wide open beneath him. The fissures in the ground reached out like gaping jaws, ready to swallow him whole. But something inside Alex shifted. He didn't just feel fear anymore. He felt the stirrings of anger, of defiance, and of a desire to prove something not just to the figure before him, but to himself. "I'm not afraid anymore," he whispered, almost as if to reassure himself. The figure smirked, and the world around him seemed to freeze in time. The storm raged above, but Alex felt a strange calm wash over him. The trials had tested his mind, his fears, but this next challenge would be different. It would test something deeper, the trial of the heart. The air around him grew still, and suddenly, Alex was standing alone in an empty space, the storm gone, the desert vanished. He found himself in a place that felt familiar, yet unsettlingly foreign, a quiet, dimly lit room. The walls were lined with old photographs and memories, the faces of people he had loved, people who had once meant everything to him. At the center of the room was a simple wooden table, and upon it lay a letter. The envelope was old and frayed, the ink barely legible, but Alex recognized the handwriting instantly. It was his mother's, the very same handwriting that had once comforted him in his darkest moments. His fingers trembled as he reached for the letter, his mind racing with 1,000 questions. But as he lifted the envelope, he felt something strange, a deep, hollow emptiness. As if the very essence of the room was draining his energy, he opened the letter, and as he read the words inside, his heart froze. The letter spoke of regret, of a love lost, of mistakes made. His mother's words, written before her passing, were full of sorrow and apology. She had always been there for him, had always supported him, but in the end she had never fully understood him. The letter spoke of her fear that Alex would never live up to his potential, that he would always carry the weight of her own regrets on his shoulders. "You see," the voice of the twisted figure echoed in his mind, "you can never escape the past. You can never outrun the failures of those who came before you. Your heart is tainted by their mistakes." The weight of the words hit Alex like a punch to the gut. His mother's regret, his father's abandonment, the way he had always felt like he wasn't good enough. All of it came rushing back to him in that single moment. But it wasn't just the past that haunted him now. It was the fear of repeating those mistakes, of never truly breaking free from the chains of his own heart. The room seemed to close in around him, the air thick with an overwhelming sense of despair. Alex could feel his heart racing, the weight of his emotions pulling him down. But in the midst of the suffocating darkness, something inside him sparked, a small but undeniable light. He had the power to choose. He had the power to let go of the past, to forgive himself and move forward. He had always carried the burden of others' mistakes, but now he understood. He didn't have to. He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath, and when he opened them again, the room was gone. The storm had returned, the wind howling around him once more, but this time he wasn't afraid. He was ready. The twisted figure loomed in front of him, its expression unreadable. "Well, The figure demanded. Have you proven your heart? Alex met its gaze, his voice steady and clear. I have. I have faced my fears and I've let go of my past. I will move forward. I will not be defined by the mistakes of others. The figure stood silent for a moment as if weighing his words. Then with a final ominous nod it spoke. Then you are ready. The next trial awaits. The storm raged louder than ever, its fury threatening to consume Alex as he stood on the edge of the swirling abyss. The trials had tested his mind, his heart, and now the final trial awaited, the trial of the soul. The ancient sentinel's cold, glowing eyes had not left him since his confrontation with the twisted figure. Its presence loomed over Alex like a shadow, silent and watching. But this trial was different. Alex could feel it deep within him, the weight of the moment. The very air seemed to pulse with an energy he couldn't understand, an energy that seemed to be pulling him deeper into the temple. The walls around him shifted and groaned, the stone carving and symbols twisting in unnatural ways. The path that had once been clear had now become a maze of dark corridors, each one more disorienting than the last. The gate, the trials, the tests, it was all leading him somewhere. But where? Where do I go now? Alex asked aloud, his voice barely a whisper against the howling wind. He had survived the trial of the mind. He had faced his deepest fears, the parts of himself he would rather forget. And he had faced the trial of the heart, confronting the ghosts of his past, the love, the loss, and the overwhelming weight of the mistakes he had carried for so long. But now it was time to confront the truth. You have learned nothing, a voice cold and hollow whispered behind him. Alex spun around, his heart racing. The voice echoed through the temple, but he saw no one. The wind screamed in his ears, but all he could see was darkness. The path before him seemed to disappear into the black void, and yet he felt a pull, compelling him to move forward. You still don't understand, the voice continued, echoing from every corner of the temple. Your journey is not about gaining knowledge. It is about confronting something far deeper. You have come to this place seeking answers, but the truth you seek will not set you free. Alex's breath caught in his throat. The words struck deep, as though they were not merely a warning but a revelation that would change everything. He had thought that this journey, these trials, would unlock some great secret, some hidden power that would explain everything. But now, in the depths of this forsaken temple, he was beginning to realize that the truth he sought was far more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. The air around him grew colder, the shadows deeper. The whispers returned, louder now, swirling in his mind like a storm of thoughts and voices. They didn't come from the walls nor from the gate, they came from within him. Memories, emotions, truths he had buried long ago, all resurfaced, unbidden, unstoppable. Suddenly the ground beneath him shook, the very foundation of the temple groaning and cracking as if it were alive. Alex stumbled, his legs giving way as the darkness enveloped him. He fell to his knees, his mind spinning with the weight of everything that had brought him to this moment. You think you have been chosen, the voice said again, its tone mocking. But in truth you are no different from the countless souls that have come before you. You are a pawn in a game far beyond your comprehension. The darkness around him seemed to pulse with an ancient, malevolent energy, and the temperature dropped so sharply that Alex's breath turned to mist in the air. His heartbeat thudded in his ears, drowning out everything else. Who are you? He demanded, his voice hoarse, his fear raw and exposed. What is this place? What do you want from me? The answer came in a flash, like a bolt of lightning through his mind. The walls of the temple began to dissolve, replaced by an overwhelming vision. He was no longer in the chamber, no longer standing in the dark corridors. Instead, he was standing in the heart of an ancient, forgotten world, an endless expanse of ruined cities and shattered civilizations. The sky above was a sickly orange, the sun a dying ember on the horizon. The land stretched out in all directions, barren and desolate, with no life to be seen. And in the distance he saw it, an immense, dark figure standing at the center of this ruined world. It was the Sentinel, but it was different. Its eyes glowed like twin suns, burning with an unnatural power. Its body was made of stone and metal, and it stood over the ruins of a great city, the remnants of a civilization long lost to time. The figure was not merely a guardian. It was the force that had destroyed this world. It was the embodiment of destruction itself. Alex's mind reeled as the vision expanded, showing him a history far older than anything he had ever imagined. A race of beings, ancient, powerful, and proud, had created the Sentinel along with the Gate to protect the universe from an even greater threat. But the Sentinel's creators had been flawed, their hunger for power leading to their own destruction. They had unleashed something so dangerous that it had consumed their entire civilization. The Sentinel, once a protector, had become a weapon of annihilation, bound by its creator's mistakes, and now Alex understood. The truth he had been seeking was not some great revelation of knowledge or power. It was a warning, one that the Sentinel had been waiting to pass down to whoever opened the gate. It had chosen Alex not because he was special, but because he was the next in a long line of fools who had dared to uncover the past. And now, the temple, the gate, and the Sentinel itself were all designed to prevent that knowledge from spreading any further, to ensure that the cycle of destruction would never repeat. "You are the last," the voice intoned, its presence more insistent now. "The last to make the same mistake. The last to believe that you can control the truth. You are the final test. If you fail, all will be lost, just as it was before." The vision shattered, and Alex was back in the temple, his knees pressed against the cold stone floor. His mind spun with the weight of what he had just seen. He wasn't just facing trials of mind, heart, and soul. He was facing the consequences of an ancient, destructive force that had been unleashed by his own curiosity. The Sentinel's glowing eyes were now fixed on him, its massive form looming over him like a god of destruction. The room seemed to shake with the sheer force of its presence, and the air around Alex crackled with power. "Now you must choose," the Sentinel said, its voice both cold and final. "You have learned the truth. You know what lies behind the gate. Will you unlock it and risk bringing the same fate to your world, or will you leave it sealed forever, ensuring that the mistakes of the past never repeat?" Alex's mind raced as the weight of the choice settled on his shoulders. He had come this far and he had uncovered the truth, but at what cost? The past had shown that knowledge and power could be dangerous, that the desire to control it could lead to ruin. But how could he turn back now? The temptation to know more, to understand the power behind the gate, was overwhelming. For a moment he thought he might collapse under the pressure, but then he stood up, straightening his back. He had faced his fears, his heart, and his soul. Now it was time to face the truth, no matter what it meant. The decision hung in the air like an invisible weight, pressing down on Alex's chest. The Sentinel's cold, calculating eyes pierced him with an intensity that made his entire body tremble. The room seemed to contract, the walls pressing in on him, forcing him to confront the immensity of his choice. He had come here seeking knowledge, answers, truths about the universe that no one had dared to uncover. But now the truth was no longer a beacon of hope. It was a burden, a heavy reality that threatened to crush him. The realization was too much for one person to bear. The knowledge behind the gate wasn't meant for anyone. It was too dangerous, too powerful to be wielded by anyone, not even him. But the Sentinel, standing before him like an immovable force, had made it clear that there was no escaping the decision. "Choose," it had said. "Will you risk it all, or will you leave the gate sealed forever?" Alex's mind raced. The stakes had escalated beyond anything he could have imagined. He had wanted to be the hero, to unlock the secrets that had been hidden for so long. But was he prepared to carry the weight of those secrets? Could he bear the consequences of unsealing the past, of unbinding the power that had destroyed civilizations before him? The thought of walking away, of leaving the gate sealed, of abandoning the quest for knowledge, stung him like a bitter pill. It wasn't the easy way out. It wasn't the path of discovery. But deep down, he knew it was the only choice that would spare him, and the world, from the catastrophic consequences of unleashing something so ancient, so powerful, that no one could control it. His fingers trembled at his side as he stepped forward, uncertainty clouding his every move. The room seemed to stretch out as though the very air was thickening around him. The glowing eyes of the Sentinel never wavered, its ancient gaze fixed on him with a chilling sense of inevitability. "You cannot hesitate," the Sentinel rumbled, its voice deep and unyielding. "Once you make your choice, there is no turning back. The path you walk will determine not just your fate, but the fate of those who follow." Alex took a slow, deliberate breath. His heart thundered in his chest, the pulse in his temples throbbing with every beat. He knew what he had to do. He had to stop this madness. The images of the ruined civilizations, the desolation, The ancient forces that had once threatened to tear apart the universe. They flashed in his mind, a vivid reminder of the cost of curiosity and ambition. He had come to this place as an adventurer, but now he saw himself as something else, a protector. The truth behind the gate could not be unleashed. Not now, not ever. "I choose to seal it," Alex said, his voice unwavering despite the uncertainty that gnawed at him from within. His heart clenched with a sense of finality. The past cannot be rewritten. The power inside that gate must remain hidden. The sentinel's glowing eyes flickered briefly, as though processing the decision. The silence between them felt like an eternity, and the walls of the temple seemed to breathe with an almost sentient awareness. Then, without warning, the ground beneath Alex's feet began to tremble violently. A deafening roar echoed through the chamber, the sound so loud it felt as though the very fabric of the universe was unraveling. The temple seemed to groan in agony, the walls shaking as if they were alive. The temperature dropped sharply again, and the air became thick with an oppressive force. Alex stumbled backward, struggling to keep his balance as the stone floor cracked and buckled beneath him. Dust and debris filled the air, and the light from the sentinel's eyes grew brighter, blinding in its intensity. The temple was reacting to his decision, but in ways he hadn't anticipated. The ground beneath him cracked open, and Alex saw a glowing fissure begin to spread like a wound through the stone. The stone walls began to split apart, revealing a yawning abyss below. The power within the temple was awakening, and it seemed to respond to the very essence of Alex's choice. "You have sealed the gate," the sentinel's voice boomed, its tone filled with both approval and an eerie finality. "But it is not so simple. The power you sought to contain cannot be sealed without consequence. You must face what lies beneath." A shadow stirred in the depths of the temple, an unnatural presence that seemed to rise from the very heart of the earth. The air grew colder still, and Alex felt the darkness creeping in, suffocating him. The abyss below seemed to call to him, pulling him toward it, drawing him closer to whatever horror lay hidden in its depths. The ground beneath him gave way, and Alex fell, plummeting into the dark void below. His body twisted in midair, and everything around him blurred into chaos. The descent was terrifying and endless, as though the very fabric of reality was being torn apart. And then, in an instant, everything stopped. Alex landed hard on the cold stone floor. The impact knocked the wind from his lungs, and he gasped for air. His vision swam, and he struggled to push himself up, only to find himself in the middle of a vast, dark cavern, an underground world that seemed to stretch out in all directions. The walls were smooth and slick with moisture, their surfaces gleaming with an eerie, otherworldly glow. He rose to his feet, his breath coming in sharp gasps, and realized that he was not alone. All around him, shadowy figures moved, their forms indistinct, as though they were nothing more than the remnants of a forgotten nightmare. The air was thick with an oppressive energy, and Alex could feel the weight of something ancient, something powerful pressing down on him. "Where am I?" he whispered, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "You are in the heart of the abyss," a voice responded, deep and guttural, coming from the shadows. "The place where power lies dormant, waiting to be awakened. The place where you will confront your fate." Suddenly, the shadows around him began to shift, and the figures in the darkness started to take shape. They were tall, monstrous beings, their forms massive and alien, their eyes glowing with an unsettling light. They moved closer, surrounding him, their presence overwhelming. What do you want from me?" Alex asked, his voice barely a whisper. "We want you to understand," the voice said again, now closer, more urgent. "You sought to seal the gate, but the truth cannot be contained. It will find its way out through you." Alex's heart raced as the figures closed in on him, their eyes boring into his soul. This was no longer just about knowledge. This was about power. And now, Alex realized, the power he had tried to contain had begun to consume him. Alex's heart raced as he stood alone in the vast, dark cavern, surrounded by the towering, monstrous figures. The air was thick with an ancient power that pressed against him, squeezing the very life from his body. The shadows flickered and twisted, each movement sharp and deliberate, as if the darkness itself were aware of him, watching him. His breath was shallow, his pulse thundering in his chest. The silence that hung between them was deafening. He could feel the weight of their eyes on him, their ancient gaze probing every inch of his being. It was as though they were searching for something inside of him, something hidden, something that would finally awaken the true power that had been sealed away for eons. "You are a fool," one of the shadowy beings spoke, its voice low and gravelly, vibrating through the ground beneath Alex's feet. It was not a question but a statement, a cold judgment that made Alex's blood run cold. "You sought to control what should never be controlled. The truth cannot be locked away. It will always find its way out." Alex swallowed hard, the weight of their words sinking deep into his soul. He had thought that sealing the gate would save him, save the world from the horrors that lay hidden within. But now, standing in the heart of the abyss, he realized that there was no escaping the consequences of his actions. The knowledge he had uncovered, the power he had touched, was not something that could be contained or forgotten. It had already begun to awaken, and there was no turning back. "You think you can walk away from this?" Another figure hissed, stepping closer, its eyes burning with a malevolent intensity. The cavern seemed to tremble beneath its presence, as though the very earth beneath him was responding to its power. "You opened the gate. You set the wheel in motion. Now you must face what comes next." Alex's legs trembled beneath him, the weight of their words threatening to crush him. His mind screamed for him to run, to find a way out of this nightmare. But there was nowhere to go. He was trapped by his own choices, by the very power he had sought to control. The ground beneath him shifted again, and the shadows deepened, swirling around him like a cyclone. The figures loomed closer, their forms stretching and distorting in the dark. He could feel the pull of the abyss, the crushing force of the universe itself, reaching up from the depths, drawing him down. "It is too late to run." The first figure spoke again, its voice resonating with an ancient power that vibrated through the very air. "The universe is awakening, Alex. The balance that has been maintained for eons is breaking. You are the catalyst, the spark that has ignited the fire." Alex felt his knees buckle beneath him, the weight of their words pressing down on him like an iron vice. He wanted to deny it, to push back against the overwhelming flood of truth, but he couldn't. He knew, deep down, that this was what had been set in motion the moment he touched the sealed gate. The universe was shifting, realigning itself, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. A low rumble shook the cavern, and the walls seemed to vibrate with an unnatural energy. The shadows began to move with greater purpose, coalescing into a single massive shape. A form that towered above him, its eyes glowing with an intensity that pierced through the darkness like a blade. It was the source of the power that had been hidden away for millennia. The thing that had been kept at bay by the sentinel, by the gate, by the ancient force that had bound it. Alex could feel the presence of the creature before he even saw it, its immense power, its unrelenting hunger. He knew in the deepest part of his soul that this was the true force behind the sentinel, the entity that had once destroyed entire civilizations. "You have freed me," the creature's voice boomed, a sound so powerful it felt like it was resonating from within his very bones. "You have broken the seal that bound me, and now the universe shall know what it is to face the true cost of your actions." Alex staggered back, his heart pounding in his chest as the creature stepped forward, its form shifting in and out of focus, as though it were made of both light and shadow, matter and void. Its eyes burned with an intensity that was almost blinding, and its mere presence seemed to warp reality around it. The universe itself was bending to its will, shifting and twisting as the creature stepped into the world once more. "No," Alex gasped, his voice hoarse and strained. "I didn't mean to. This wasn't what I wanted. I only wanted to understand." As the creature raised a hand, and with a single fluid motion, the air around Alex seemed to freeze. Time itself stopped, and he found himself suspended in a frozen moment, unable to move, unable to speak. "You cannot undo what has been done," the creature intoned, its voice both cold and ancient. "The gate has been opened. The power that lies within it is now yours to command. But be warned, with great power comes great destruction." The creature stepped forward again, its form growing larger, more imposing. The ground beneath Alex's feet cracked open, and the abyss seemed to deepen, pulling him toward it. His body screamed with the urge to escape, to flee, but there was nowhere to run. The world was collapsing around him, the forces of the universe realigning, and he was caught in the middle of it all. "The universe is awakening," the creature whispered, its voice a low guttural sound that sent chills down Alex's spine. "The time of balance has passed. What comes next will shape the fate of all existence. You have awakened what was meant to remain dormant." With a flick of the creature's hand, The air around Alex seemed to vibrate with a raw, untamed energy. The universe itself was shifting, collapsing into a singular moment that stretched and twisted, pulling at the very fabric of reality. Alex could feel the weight of it, the crushing force of the knowledge he had unlocked, the power he had unleashed, and then, in a sudden burst of light, everything stopped. The darkness vanished, the shadows melted away, and Alex was standing once again in the heart of the temple, the gate behind him now sealed. The creature was gone, its presence faded into nothingness, but the weight of its power remained, lingering in the air. The sentinel's eyes locked onto him, their expression unreadable. The ground beneath him felt solid again, but the universe had changed. Something had shifted and Alex could feel it. The balance was broken, the old world was gone, and a new one was rising in its place. "You have chosen," the sentinel spoke, its voice quiet, almost solemn. "The gate is sealed, but the consequences of your choice have already begun." The universe is no longer the same. Alex stood motionless, his mind spinning. He had sealed the gate, yes, but the power that lay within it had already been unleashed. The balance had shifted, and with it the fate of the universe was now in his hands. "What now?" Alex asked, his voice barely a whisper. The sentinel's eyes narrowed, its gaze piercing him as if it could see straight into his soul. "Now," it said, its tone grave, "you must live with the consequences. The universe will awaken and you will face what comes next."